Hello and welcome to the Unbundled Attorney Mastermind Podcast. My name is Lee Vernon and I'm the founder and CEO of Unbundled Attorney. In this podcast, we interview our unbundled attorneys, as well as the leading experts in the industry, to identify the best practices for converting leads into paying clients and how to ethically and profitably deliver unbundled legal services and other affordable options in your practice. To learn more about how our exclusive unbundled leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com. All right, welcome to the Unbundled Attorney Mastermind Podcast. I'm here with Lee Vernon, who is one of our unbundled attorneys out of San Diego, California, providing family law services. And we've got a good solid year, I think, working together so far.
About a year.
And he's been doing a really good job serving the clients we send him in San Diego. And really excited just to have an opportunity to unpack the saga that has been our relationship and the growth of your firm ever since we started working together. So
thanks, Dave.
Just really happy to be here with a nice, beautiful view of San Diego behind us. And
can't complain.
Yeah, man, this is just a terrible, terrible office you have here. So
right. It's a horrible space.
Yeah, really happy to be here. So thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you guys as well.
Yeah. So maybe a good place to start is just give us a little bit of background on how you got your start in the practice of law.
Sure.
And maybe share just a little bit about the legal incubator that you were a part of. That
sure, of course.
Up and running.
So yeah, that's a good segue, Dave. So I started off right out the gate after I passed the bar. So I started practicing law basically in January of 2015. And so my law school, Thomas Jefferson School of Law, has a solo incubator program. And basically, it's just, in a nutshell, it's a wonderful program that allows younger attorneys or even attorneys who have a little bit of experience to have some great resources to be able to go out and hang their own shingle, and open their own solo law practice. Mm-hmm. And so one of the benefits to the program was I was able to have a very seasoned civil litigation attorney who is also a law professor mentor myself and some of my cohorts in the solo practice incubator program. And that really allowed me to, start off and even take some cases that I may not have been able to take in the beginning because I quite frankly wouldn't have had even the resources to do so.
Like both financially and also from an experience standpoint, or?
A little bit of both, yeah, exactly. So I was able to have, some guidance and from a seasoned trial attorney to be able to take a trial very early on in my case. And it would have been difficult to do so had I not had the advice and guidance of a very experienced attorney. And also, just as important, the incubator program allowed us to have a very affordable office space. So,
great place just to have a place to work, bring clients, without having to have a lot of overhead to get the start. Right?
Exactly, right. Because that's one thing that I learned early on. You have to keep your overhead low because as you're building your brand, your reputation, your business, you don't have the financial resources unless you have a rich aunt or uncle who can, pay thousands of dollars to give you a beautiful office space. So it was nice to be able to focus on practicing law and building up my business and not worrying about how am I going to pay my rent, for the office space.
Yeah, and similarly, if you're working in a legal incubator, I'm assuming there were a lot of other attorneys you're working with that are part of the program, and then you're able to have kind of a collaboration working together between other attorneys that are new.
And thanks for reminding me that, Dave. It's easy to forget because it's been a couple years, but that was also a wonderful part of the incubator program, just having, even though some of the attorneys were newer attorneys, maybe had only been practicing 1 to 2 years, just to have someone who had a little more experience or even somebody who was at the same level to be able to say, hey, here's what I see in the case based on the facts you're representing. This is, why don't you try this or, try this angle from a legal standpoint. And that was a wonderful resource to have because, had I just hung out my own shingle, open, a law office somewhere in downtown San Diego and not had the mentorship, I think it would have taken me quite a bit longer to, to build up a profitable practice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things we're really focused on, especially recently, is starting to build community.
Sure.
And getting you in touch with ourselves. This is part of the reason why we're doing the video podcast, and so that we have an opportunity to meet in person and get to know each other. But also with the retreat we have coming up in March and some of the things we're going to be launching in the retreat, having you an opportunity to get to know some of the other attorneys in the network, share ideas, get input, talk about some of the technology you're using or whatever it is that would be of benefit that other lawyers have implemented in their practice, and having that kind of mastermind concept of everyone sharing ideas for the betterment of everyone involved.
Certainly.
Right, and so it's really cool to hear that the incubator had that same type of characteristic,
right,
in which everyone's kind of working together, cooperatively, so you can share resources, and I'm assuming all become better attorneys as a result.
Right, exactly. It just makes you more well-rounded in your practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been interesting to hear about a lot of the incubators that have been opening up all across the country, and there's quite a few of them.
Right.
Last time we checked the directory, there's a resource directory of legal incubators, which we can link to in the podcast show notes. I'll make a note of that. One of the things that these incubators have been working on is educating attorneys on how to offer unbundled legal services profitably in their practice. We're going to be doing a presentation up there tomorrow. Do you see that as a good potential vehicle for educating a new generation of attorneys that may be able to embrace limited scope and working with people?
I really do. And Dave, I actually have early on in one of my cases, I have a good case example. When I first started my practice, I did a lot of research before linking up with you guys at Unbundled into the unbundled or limited scope representation. And so I've found that a lot of older, experienced attorneys don't even understand the limited scope unbundled option. Mm-hmm. And so I had a case where I was helping a client who didn't have a lot of money, but the client had enough money to pay me to handle a couple steps of the case. And I remember the attorney actually on the other side threatened me with reporting me to the state bar for providing unbundled legal services. Mm-hmm. And I had to basically nicely tell him, you don't really know what you're talking about. I actually did research on limited scope unbundled services, and you can offer them in a family law case. Sorry, you've not experienced this yet. Mm-hmm. And so I wholeheartedly believe that it is a great unbundled services would be a great way to link up with new attorneys, mm-hmm. to teach them that option from a business standpoint, because I think a lot of attorneys are really missing out by refusing or not even considering offering unbundled services because, quite frankly, if somebody can pay you even for a couple hours of your time, that's money you would have never earned, mm-hmm. As a business person from a business standpoint. So yeah, I believe that, 100% and believe wholeheartedly that having the unbundled cooperative, some type of program, mm-hmm. with incubators throughout the country would help, both unbundled and new attorneys continue to be successful.
Mm-hmm. In your perspective, why do you think so many lawyers haven't implemented these? Because it seems like such common sense. And we talk about on the podcast all the time how well attorneys are doing in offering this and being able to break things down, limits the accounts receivable to basically zero. Right. Clients really appreciate it because it's so much more affordable and everyone else is getting turned away. But so it really just seems like it makes a lot of sense, but there seems to be some misconceptions or misinformation or misunderstandings around the ethical nature or the efficacy of these options. And I'm just wondering from your perspective, with other attorneys maybe you've talked to about it, and they just, what is the objection? Like, why?
I think a lot of it is, especially with maybe the older attorneys, I think they become so used to saying, hey, I have this experience and I'm above handling a matter where somebody walks in my door and says I only have $500, mm-hmm. because they're not looking at that $500 potential client from the unbundled standpoint, right? Yes. They're looking at that from, well, my minimum retainer in a family law matter is $5,000.
Yes.
And you're coming in with 10% of my minimum retainer. I don't want to talk to you.
That's right.
Whereas if, they could easily have, especially at a larger firm, a junior associate do the unbundled work, mm-hmm. at maybe perhaps $250 an hour. Mm-hmm. That's $500 that the firm would have, never earned prior to doing so. And going back to your point, they don't have to worry about an outstanding invoice. Yes. You take the $500, you do 2 hours of work, you draft your contract as such with the client, mm-hmm. and you're done.
That's right.
And so I think, to answer your question, maybe it's a little bit of the greed, the ego that, mm-hmm. That we see with attorneys.
Yeah, that's been a really consistent kind of flavor, or like, it's almost like that they feel like it's second rate. Exactly. Or like something like that, or maybe they believe they aren't going to make money doing that. And so it's one of the things that, it's just the purpose behind this podcast is starting to educate and build awareness around how effective it can be to deliver unbundled services and how profitable it can be as well.
Sure.
So maybe we could just talk about how you transitioned to starting unbundled services. I don't know how you got exposed to it, if it was through us or other educational programs, or you just started doing it on your own or whatnot. It might have been through Marlene, I'm not sure.
Sure.
Maybe you could talk about that, and then also just how that's helped you develop your
of course
as a result.
So yeah, it's an interesting question, Dave. Basically, I fell into Unbundled early on in my career with my practice from just doing research on the limited scope representation and seeing, hey, right now I'm a new attorney, so I have a lot of folks coming to me from even legal clinics. They don't have $5,000 retainers.
Yes. And
so I had done the research and had kind of done a little bit of legwork to build up, not even a full-blown business plan, but I knew I wanted to incorporate limited scope or unbundled services into my practice. And so my very first law firm website actually does talk a lot about limited scope representation. I didn't really know how to effectively market it though. And so I was just I would offer that to clients or potential clients who would come to me, through different referral sources and say, hey, I have $1,000. What can you do for me? So, I would kind of break that down and say, hey, here's my hourly rate. Here's how many billable hours I could offer you. That's better than nothing. But I had no true sense of direction. And so the way that I first learned about Unbundled, an attorney who was formerly an Unbundled client in San Diego, I was doing some contract work for her on a case-by-case basis, just trying to build my business and learn some things. And I found out that she was using Unbundled. And so, and so I actually called Graham one day and said, hey, I'm Lee Vernon. I'm a new family law attorney. I really think, what Unbundled is doing is cool, and I've seen it work really well for my colleague Marlene. And, Graham unfortunately couldn't sign me up because Unbundled is a great lead generation service. It's wonderful. And so that stuck out in my mind because most other services who try to link you up with new clients, they will call your phone time and time again after you reach out to them. And, I kind of wondered, hey, there's something to Unbundled. It worked for Marlene and they're not able to sign me up right now. This has to be a very legitimate service. And so unfortunately, and unfortunately, some things happened to the former attorney, Marlene, and she wasn't able to continue with Unbundled. And Graham called me up one day and said, hey, remember me? We have a spot open in San Diego. Do you want to take it? And, there was no question as to that answer being yes. And so I was able to sign up as, with Unbundled, and it's been wonderful.
And so when you were working with Marlene, because she was doing a lot of Unbundled services as well, so you were getting some experience for the way that she was offering that in her practice. And so by the time the leads became available, when she transitioned out, you kind of already had some experience working with her as a contract lawyer, to be able to start delivering it in your own practice from
exactly there. And so I unfortunately wasn't able to dive super deep into the Unbundled process, but I saw just from the outside looking in, hey, this works because 99% of her clients were coming through Unbundled. And she was very busy.
Yes, so. She was very busy for a very long time, and it was unfortunate what happened to her partner.
Exactly.
And how did you originally start researching limited scope? Was that shared with you in law school, or because obviously you've got a lot of clients coming to you, don't have 5,000. Most lawyers would think then you get no help, right? But you were like, how do I help this person? Limited scope. Like how did you make that connection originally? So
a lot of it, the seed for that, the limited scope idea was planted by Lilise McCoy. And so she runs the Center for Solo Practitioners, and I can put you in touch with her, that's no problem. But she is an outstanding attorney. She has, decades of experience in civil litigation. And right now she's a full-time law professor at Thomas Jefferson School of Law, just down the street, here in San Diego. And so on top of running the solo practice incubator program that we spoke about a few moments ago, she also teaches a few solo practice centered courses at Thomas Jefferson School of Law. And so when I was a law school student, I took one of her solo practice courses, and she talked a lot about the limited scope representation option. And so that really planted the seed. And so it was just, kind of a natural progression to, when I was finally linked up with you guys, to, really having some good resources from Unbundled to show, here's, okay, you know how to practice law, you're an attorney, but you also, you need to look at, the limited scope Unbundled option from a business standpoint. And that's something that Unbundled really helped me with. in terms of, realizing, all right, you do need a process. You can't just, it's wonderful to have the idea of, okay, I'm going to offer unbundled representation for somebody who may only have $1,000 maximum to go towards legal fees.
Yes.
But how do I get those people in the door?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so that, I had that big disconnect. The seed was planted to, early on in my career.
Like
as
conceptually,
an attorney. Right.
And then it's like the practical application.
Right. How
and
do
doing
you
that
do
effectively and efficiently and conveying that to the client, educating them on those options and figuring out how to limit the scope, properly with that client based on their budget, based on what they need help with. What kind of options can you offer? Can you do it as a flat rate? Do you do it as an hour? I mean, there really is a whole business model around what appears to be a very simple concept, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I would love to unpack that in just a second. Some of the things that you've had to learn how to do to impact that we either, educated you on or something like that, so we can start to unpack that. But one of the things that, to circle back on, there was another point. I think so. Your point about the law school and it being taught in law school was actually where you got exposed to limited scope.
Right.
I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with like Forrest Moston, who's the father of unbundling. He's a adjunct professor at the UCLA.
Right, I've heard of him.
Really, really solid guy. Very passionate about this industry and how unbundled legal services can impact access to justice across the United States. And we've talked a lot about how do we instill limited scope and unbundled services into a much broader range of attorneys, or at least a new generation of lawyers. Right. And so the conversation has really been around law schools,
right?
And how we can get professors and get this taught as a course or even as a segment of a course minimum.
Right.
That this is available. This is something that is broadly applicable in the way the marketplace is nowadays.
Exactly.
Very different from what it was 20 years ago.
Right.
And so it's really cool and really great to hear that was the seed that kind of got you started in starting to offer these services, or at least have the idea and the concept, which then evolved once obviously we started working together and then launched into the business. So for anyone out there that's watching this video that is involved with law schools or has any influence or can further help the possibility of getting unbundled services taught in law schools, we're more than happy to support with sharing information, tactics, process, whatever it might be that could be helpful for implementing these types of courses into law schools, because we do feel like that's just such a really important aspect of educating this next generation of attorneys that could really have an impact on access to justice if they only knew how to do it. Right. So let's get into how you do it, right? Because it's the one concept. Yes, you can limit the scope of the involvement and only do specific agreed upon tasks. Great, I just read that on the Wikipedia, and so I understand that concept now. So now how do we implement that into our practice effectively? So there's some specific things all the way from when you first talk to the client, how you do that consultation, and then the different service options you might offer. Maybe you can start with some of the things you've learned as far as that process as you described that's helped you be effective at actually delivering these services to your clients.
Sure. And I think, Dave, one of the biggest things that Unbundled taught me, from the get-go is it's easy to engage with the potential client, but it's also easy to maybe spend too much time on the phone with the client, or you have to find the happy medium, not spending enough time. So one thing that I really like about the Unbundled, process is, you guys teach us as attorneys how to, from the get-go, when you make that first contact with the client, how to tactfully, kind of segue your conversation into, hey, I offer unbundled services. I also offer full representation, but also without maybe forcing somebody or making a potential client feel like you only want to offer them unbundled services, or you're only interested in full representation, full-blown representation, with the larger retainers. So, I know for me, just the guidance that you guys have set up to be able to say, okay, these are the key points that you need to hit on when you're talking to somebody who's a prospective client, and you're able to help me see things from more of a business standpoint, because of course as an attorney I care about all my cases, but I also have to make money. I can't pay my bills, I can't save for my family's future. So I really like how the process basically allows you to feel comfortable, in saying, okay, I'm going to offer this unbundled service, but how do I present this to the client without, being off-putting or, sounding maybe even egotistical when I bring up the full representation option. So I really like how you guys have trained me to, from the not to the business, but from the business perspective or standpoint, just how to make that initial contact. So, when you make
the initial qualifying script?
Exactly. The qualifying script was so helpful in keeping, kind of setting a roadmap, right? To say, okay, I need to not be on the phone too long with this person, but, also not be on the phone for too short of a period of time to be off-putting. And so by following the script, I was able to, see a huge increase, because when I first started, I kind of tried to do my own thing. I'll admit that, right? Graham knows this. And so, I was kind of just talking to people.
It's the blah, blah approach.
Right, exactly.
Blah, blah, blah. Want to sign up?
And right, and so then, when we kind of looked back at, okay, Graham and I touched base, how'd the first month go? I'm like, oh, well, shoot, I don't know, right? I'm kind of working on, trying to bring some of these people in. So then, Graham did a good job of coaching me through things and saying, okay, look, you're a good attorney, but we're gonna highlight the business side of things here. What are you doing? Are you following the script? No, I wasn't, right? And so we had a great heart to heart, and it was wonderful though, because it was great constructive, feedback and criticism. And so I found that once I started following the script and, finding that happy medium, because it's not ever, I don't want to put a time limit, but I would say 10 minutes or less. I try to do most of my initial contacts in 10 minutes or less and get the person to come into the office.
Yes.
Because if they can meet me in person, I say, follow the script, but then we talk about, all right, bring your paperwork, bring your court documents. If you have an open case, or if you have previously, filed a case and you have court orders. And so I found that by following the script, getting people in the door, most people will hire me for some type of service. And it's everything from folks who start out with just the unbundled option, maybe a couple hours of my billable time. I have had plenty of cases turn into people who hire me to handle maybe not their full case, but one or more difficult court hearings, and it turns into a very good paying client.
Right. So originally, were you spending a lot more time on the phone? And then they were trying to get them to make a decision. So if I were to guess, you would have had maybe only a small fraction of people actually coming in the office, but almost every one of those was retaining you. But then there were a bunch that were just not coming and not retaining.
Right.
So you were batting really high percentage of those that came in the office, but just not a lot were coming in the office because you're having a longer call. Addressing their needs, giving them advice, and so maybe you can draw the contrast between the two approaches.
Right, exactly, and that's a good point, Dave, because I noticed, for the folks that I found that happy medium and just, had the conversation and said, hey, not when can you come in? I have 2 appointment slots available. Which one of those spots would you like?
Yes.
You get them to come in, and I found that a majority of those people, high percentages, at least 70%. Of the people who actually come into my office would hire me for some type of service, versus the folks that I would stay on the phone with for longer periods of time. Maybe, some of it was, someone who wasn't ready to hire an attorney yet, or sometimes, you get people who they just don't know, they made contact, but maybe they're serious, maybe they're not serious about hiring an attorney. But I found that regardless of what the person's, intent or background was, the people that I didn't bring into the office, your percentage is almost zero in getting those people to come in. There are a few exceptions. I've had folks who are from out of state who really can't come in. But, I could do like a Google Duo video chat or, a Skype video chat with those folks. And so, but with the exception of the outliers for people who are not actually in San Diego but have a case for one reason or another here in San Diego, it's pretty much a 0% success rate on people that you don't at least get to come in for an in-seat appointment.
Yeah, there's been some lawyers that have had a lot of success in other regions enrolling clients over the phone. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they cover like a broader region. And for example, in the Bay Area, right? Like Zoe Garvin's had a lot of success enrolling clients over the phone there, because they're in San Francisco, she's in Oakland. They're like, man, that's going to be about a 30 to 40 minute drive, even just across the bridge, right? Even if their case is there. It's just a lot of commuting. Whereas in San Diego, it seems like it's a pretty tight city, right? Like people can get around pretty easily. The traffic isn't nearly as bad as LA or San Francisco. So
not even close.
Yeah, and so even just LA County, for example, it could be 20 minutes across, or it could be 2 hours, across, even in the same county, right? So there are motivating factors in other regions that could lend someone to want to just get signed up over the phone as opposed to just coming right in the office. But in your case, it isn't really that prohibitive for people to come right in. And so if there's ever a possibility that they can just come right in, I don't think there's any better way to have clients enroll if they just get a chance to hang out and get to know you in person and see the view. And see the beautiful view. Right. I mean, I stare out that window and just want to sign up.
That's why my desk faces this way.
Really? So they're all just looking at the view. It's like, wow, this guy's got mojo.
Right. And I'm easily distracted when I'm, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, you're just like zone out. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen for any clients watching.
Not for my cases.
Yeah, he faces this way.
Exactly.
Okay. So you've got the intake call, right? The initial call qualifying, just being a little bit more succinct on that one, letting them talk for a few minutes, but then starting to ask them very specific questions about their case, what they're looking to see happen, following some of that script outline, letting them know you offer both options and that they can choose, right?
Exactly.
That it puts it in the control of the amount of service that the client wants or needs in their hands. They get to tell you how much service they want and how much they want to start with. Right. Do you have some clients that will start with you, just with one specific task, and then later on transition to either additional services or full representation?
I do, and I actually have an ongoing matter where that's happening. The client's it's a divorce case, and it is a hotly contested case. The case has been going on for years, and the client previously had an attorney and realized, they didn't have any issue with the work that their previous attorney had done, but that attorney does not offer the unbundled option. And so the client realized, I'm going to have to pay a lot of money, but found that I can handle some of the aspects of my case on my own. And so the client found me through Unbundled, and their case is getting close to the trial phase. We're working out, some of the details. They're probably going to be hiring me to handle a full-blown divorce trial. Right. Dissolution of marriage in California, of course, but divorce. And this is someone who started off as an unbundled by the hour. And going back to your point, Dave, it's wonderful that you say that. Most people don't even know this as a client, but they're the boss in terms of what the attorney does and doesn't do.
Yes.
If I'm the attorney of record, on a case, a client can't tell me, no, don't show up to the court hearing if there is a scheduled hearing without me formally signing off their case and filing the proper paperwork with the court and the opposing party or attorney. But, notwithstanding something like that, the client is always in the driver's seat. So the nice thing about the unbundled option is it puts the client, at the front, in the front driver's seat. And they can tell you, hey, look, and I draft agreements all the time that expressly state, I will do with, I'm not going to make court appearance under this agreement unless we have a subsequent written agreement. But otherwise, if they have, let's say, an ongoing divorce case, dissolution of marriage case is what we call it in California again. But if their case is ongoing, they'll pay me just the hourly rate for what they need.
That's right.
And I'm just kind of on standby.
Well, looked at it another way, it actually puts the attorney in the driver's seat as well.
Right.
Because they get to choose the amount of services they will provide, or at least it's a limit. There's a limit, there's a barrier based upon what the person needs and also their financial budget, such that they aren't stuck, providing, full suite of services without having a very clear knowledge or being in a position where if the client stops paying, they could still be on the hook for that. And so at the outset, it gives you the flexibility and the control back as well. They get to choose, and you get to choose, right? Because they can say, well, I only want you for these things. Well, you can decide if you want to do that. If they want more, they can do that. But also you don't have to do more than that the client's capable of.
Right.
It's a meeting of the minds there.
Exactly, and that's a great point because, also from talking to a lot of attorney mentors that I've met over the years in the family law realm, outstanding billables become a large problem for them. And if they were offering unbundled services, they would never even get to that point to where, they have a client who owes a $2,000 bill. Why in the world would you, from a business perspective, why would you even allow someone to run up that type of bill?
Right.
Right. And it's not, not coming from an egotistical standpoint, but just a business standpoint, as law firms, we're for-profit entities, and the unbundled option is a great way to continue to be able to provide legal services for folks who may not have tens of thousands of dollars to go towards legal services. But if you carefully craft your retainer agreement with the client, you can make it so that, going back to your point, you're not ever having to provide any service without getting paid.
Has that been the case for you for the majority of the clients you're working with, that you have close to 100% accounts receivable?
Yes, within a small margin of error, maybe an hour billable outstanding. But I really do not have, come to think of it, I have no unbundled cases where I really have an outstanding billable at this point in time beyond maybe an hour.
Wow.
And even those cases were cases where the client and I engaged in a limited scope or unbundled contract to allow for a court appearance. And things went over an hour beyond what I anticipated. So
right, but that was like the most it possibly could have gone over. Is like, well, the court just took a little longer than we thought.
Exactly.
Right, but it's like, it's not going from phase to phase to phase without having a clear, payment and understanding of what's being done at each phase.
Right, because especially if you're an attorney of record in California Superior Court and Family Court, for full-blown representation, if the client doesn't cooperate with you, you have to actually file a motion to be relieved as counsel.
Yes.
You pay a fee, you have the time in court, the embarrassment of having to drag yourself and your client into court and showing your peers, hey, maybe I'm not managing my business all that well.
That's right.
So the unbundled option is a great way to alleviate.
Well, and this is one of those underlying misunderstandings, I think, as far as the profitability of unbundled services. When you really look at a full service firm, accounts receivable could be maybe at 70% or something like that. I don't know, what your experience is with any firms you've worked in the past, but it's not 100%. It's not even close to 100%. And so when you look at these big retainers, it's like a lot less getting collected. So if they're collecting 10,000, that's only 70%. That's really only 7,000, and they're doing a lot of work as well that otherwise doesn't get paid. So that's going to hit the bottom line in a big way. And so, and especially for solo practitioners that have lower overhead and are operating a more lean practice, being able to collect and consistently rely upon having those payments come in without having that accounts receivable loss, it can be really key to make sure you're maintaining and growing out a lean and profitable practice.
Yeah, and I'm a perfect example of having that financial stability from the moment that we entered into our agreement with between Unbundled and myself and my solo firm. When I first started out, I had I'd built up my practice to where I had a decent client referral basis, but it was a constant struggle. I was networking, which is still important, but I found that I was a little bit worried from time to time about, hey, how am I going to continue to bring in new potential clients? And the great thing about Unbundled was, even though some of the folks coming in through the unbundled service may only be able to start off with something like $500, I am a testament to that being a profitable business model. It is. And from the get-go, going back to an early part of our discussion today, where we talked about the reason that I think a lot of attorneys or law firms aren't interested in the unbundled option is because of a little bit of greed, or just being so set in their ways and saying, hey, I don't even want to talk to someone who only has $500.
Yep.
But the beauty of the unbundled option is you can make a very, very comfortable living just off of the unbundled services.
Because an hour is still an hour, regardless, right?
Right, and
and that's excluding if you're doing things as flat rate and then having some kind of economy of scale there.
Right, and that is going back to the flat rate. In family law cases, it's difficult to always offer a flat rate option. However,
especially if you do it as the whole thing, whereas if you can do these tasks under a flat rate.
Right, and I do, I offer flat rates quite often for unbundled services, especially where folks just need me to fill out paperwork. If it's in the family court system, I know how to fill out the paperwork, and I know within a reasonable degree of certainty how many hours that should take me.
Yeah.
So I can offer folks a flat rate and still be profitable, because on the unbundled scale, I'm not tied to having to go to court for that flat rate.
Right.
And so it has been, a wonderful, business model on my side of things, just in the short time that we've been working together, for about a year.
Cool.
So
what would be really awesome is, can we run some of the numbers First, like, lay out some of the limited scope options that you offer.
Sure.
Whether it be document preparation, limited scope. Maybe we could do like a few different options. What you might typically charge, and what is the actual amount of time you put into each one.
Sure.
Like, and how you have calculated, at least so far, as far as like what your effective hourly rate ends up being, and some of the systems you have in the back end to speed that up.
Sure.
But that's a much broader topic, but mainly let's lay out some of those options and let's look at the numbers.
Sure.
So attorneys can start to understand how they can start to, like, what is the profitability behind some of these limited scope options.
And so probably the most logical way I could go through this, Dave, would be to go through starting off with maybe like the bare minimum service that I can offer. So a lot of times, I'll have someone come in and they'll maybe even be on the fence about hiring an attorney. And I'll say, hey, I can work within reason any budget, that anyone has. We have to be reasonable about what I can offer for that budget. And so for the folks who are on the fence or who have very limited means, I will say, hey, how about...
By the way, which is key to be able to say.
Right.
I can, there's a limit to the amount of service I can provide, but I can work and provide service within any budget. And people go, I bet they just... maybe you say that to some people in person, but I can just imagine their shoulders just relaxing. They're like, okay, cool. Like this is not someone that's just going to hang up the phone if I don't got $5,000 to give to them right now, or whatever it might be, right? Like, and I'm sure a lot of clients have called a number of firms, and they finally get to you, and you're like, yeah, we can work within your budget. I mean, there's a limit to what I can do for that, but we can do that.
And so, in my experience, I've been able to offer even what I would call a 1 hour full-blown legal advice session, as little as that. I've offered that to many clients who have actually taken me up on that offer. And I say, look, we've had our initial consultation, the free 30-minute consultation. I've taken a look at your documents. I have a full understanding of what's going on in your case. Bring a notepad, right? Of course, I can't draft a legal memorandum for a 1 hour session, but I have the client bring a notepad, and we will sit there and I will just go over, all right, here's step 1. Here's what you need to do. Yep. Here's step 2. Here's how the process works. And, it could be anything from a divorce that involves no children, and somebody might have a question over how does the process work with dividing the assets? Because, you would be surprised, a lot of folks who are self-represented, they'll file their petition in the family court to ask for divorce, and they don't realize if they need something like temporary spousal support, they need to file a motion with the court to ask for it.
Yes.
And so I've been able to help, even people who have very limited means on that 1 hour legal advice session really, really get a sense of direction. And, some of the folks have turned into, clients who have paid me for subsequent sessions, and sometimes even for document prep. So one thing that I do, a lot of things, or a lot of my cases involve child custody disputes. And so if somebody came to me and said, hey, I need to draft a motion to ask to change my custody and visitation order,
modification,
right? That's something that, I don't typically do it for a completely set flat fee, but I know within a reasonable degree of certainty that just the bare bones filing the motion and drafting a declaration that needs to go with that motion to support it on an easy case, probably start off with $1,000. And a lot of people, if they're very serious about obtaining legal advice and representation, will hire me just to draft their paperwork for that $1,000. And then I'll offer, the option of, hey, keep me posted on your court dates, because when somebody files that motion, they'll receive a couple court dates. I'd love to work something out with you for further representation. Sometimes it's just maybe another hour to help them prepare, right? At my hourly rate. Or I've had many cases where the client hired me, for that $1,000 range to help them with the paperwork. And I can typically, within reason, unless there are crazy issues going on in the case and we need to submit a lot of evidence, I can keep that paperwork to within the $1,000 range more often than not, just to help them draft the paperwork. And so sometimes that's turned into the person hiring me and maybe paying me another $1,000 to go to their court hearing.
Yep. More like as a limited appearance, like
right,
notice of limited appearance.
Exactly.
Which California has
the notice
forms.
of limited scope, right, exactly. And, everybody's put on notice that I'm just the attorney of record for this child custody motion. And so I've even had cases where I've handled that type of case, and I'm the limited scope attorney for the issue of custody and visitation. But maybe because of the other parent asks for a longer hearing. another hearing is scheduled, and more often than not, those folks will retain me again to help with the subsequent hearing.
Right. Okay, so you've got the 1 hour, 1 or 2 or whatever amount of hours you need, but like at the bare bones, like at least an hour you can sit down, I can walk you through these things, explain all the different steps, and maybe take a look at what you have, give you some guidance on what needs to be done, right?
Exactly.
And that's $250, $300, $200?
$275 is typically my standard hourly rate right now. So I try to to find.
So you'll do that coaching as an hour by hour.
Exactly.
Right. So like even if you're on a $5,000 case, you're still billing at $275 an hour. And it's 100% receivable. So that's good. Like it's money in the pocket. It's the same hourly rate.
Exactly.
And then people can come in for a few $100s and get the guidance they need to get to the next
step.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And then they go, okay, well, and then you have the option to offer them the document preparation if you want to have you drafted up.
Right.
And that's really around $1,000. If you look at the economics of that, do you have any kind of document automation? Do you have a staff member, anyone that helps you with the preparation?
So I'm actually working on that right now. So funny enough, my law clerk has been my wife. She's in her last year of law school. So she's kind of helping me set up some systems and because I started off as a solo practitioner, I have a passion for helping out other solo practitioners. So I'm going to be having law school interns assist me with some of the non-attorney work. And that also helps me keep the cost down to the client. Because if I'm not paying the intern, I'm not going to bill the client for that. Because that would not be ethical. If I'm doing work on the case, I bill for it. So it's been a way to help me grow my practice. But at the same time, help folks who maybe have a little more limited means keep more of their money in their pocket to go towards legal advice for me, right? And court appearances and things of that nature. So it's been a wonderful model, and so yeah, to be honest, that has been my business model, and I'm able to kind of give back to the law school that I went to and law school students who are interested in starting their own firm, and it's been a great way to keep... Would you be able to
mentor and coach them as they're
right, exactly.
Is it volunteer on their case, or is this something you could pay them hourly for? Or
so I have a couple options. Like in the case with my wife, she was technically my extern. So in that regard, it wasn't ethical to charge because she was getting school credits. So to charge clients and bill them, for that rate. But we do actually have a few interns who are law school students who were working out terms of payment. So that is another option that we have.
And so as an attorney, you have to bill the amount that you're paying those people to the client?
No, so the way that you typically write it into the contract, and every attorney has their own way of doing things, but you have an attorney hourly rate and a law clerk hourly rate, which the law clerk hourly rate for paid law clerks is, quite frankly, much more than the going wage for a law clerk, because you're really looking more at like the full-time minimum wage rate for a law clerk starting out. But they're trained, they have some experience in the legal system through their law school coursework and contacts, and that's also a good way to help keep your clients' costs down, because let's say you can't send a law clerk to make a court appearance, but if it's a financial disclosure document, you can have a law clerk prepare that, and as the attorney, I have to do my due diligence and sign off on it, right?
Yes.
But
so do you see an opportunity? So I love the fact that you're working on bringing in interns and lower cost people that might be able to help with some of the administrative work, so you could potentially even bring the cost down, or for the appropriate candidate offer something that might be a lower price.
Right, especially
if say it's $1,000, you still can't do that, but maybe they could do $500. Okay, so you could offload some of the doc prep work or some of the administrative work to an intern, and only need to put an hour or two of your own time to review it, to get it prepared and that kind of thing. And so you could offer that as kind of a down
right,
step.
exactly.
Yep. And do you also see a possibility of having a higher effective hourly rate by still having a flat rate on that, and then having some staff or help with getting things done more efficiently? Or do you feel like it really still, for you personally, because all attorneys do this differently, has to tie into the time they're putting in, has to add up to $275 an hour, whatever the hourly time is that goes into that flat rate?
I think it's a little bit of both. And you know, and I know that's kind of a confusing answer, but
because the flat rate presents the possibility that you could build efficiency and then benefit as an attorney by leveraging software, leveraging other people's efforts, and so forth, so that you're spending less time but still delivering the same product.
Right.
Which obviously, as far as the market's concerned, the client's happy to be able to have access to an attorney that would draft their documents, their declaration for $1,000. So we know that has a value in itself.
Exactly.
The question is, does it have to take me 3.35 hours of attorney time to deliver that, which would be at $275 an hour, something like that?
Right.
Well, if it was possible once you had systems to do that in half the amount of time, like would you feel like you would have to lower the rate, or would it be you would just be able to benefit from that increased efficiency for delivering that flat rate more effectively?
Right, and that's a good point, Dave. I think realistically, from a business standpoint, as long as you're making a profit, it's not that you want to reduce your hourly rate. But let's say if I had several assistants doing that type of work, and it pushed the true attorney billable, so to speak, down to $200 an hour or $175 an hour, I wouldn't be opposed to doing that, because you're looking at it from just a strict numbers perspective, not what's my hourly rate. But I mean, if you think about it, if you could average $175 an hour on a full work day for one employee, that's pretty darn good money.
Yes.
If you scale that. So I would never say, oh, I'm gonna make that $500 flat fee job that I could do in such an efficient manner using a well-versed extern or intern or law clerk.
Yes.
I would never say don't do that. That would be insane.
Well, this gets at the opportunity that I think Unbundled Services presents, and I'm really glad that we're unpacking this, because there's so many clients that would love to have this type of service, right? Because 90% of lawyers out there would just turn that client away, as we discussed, right? But there's a very high volume of people that are offering these, that need these services at those price points. So you can get a high volume, but it's always been perceived that that's a low value, right? Like low profit, low revenue, right? But if you can look at it from the standpoint, I got a lot of these clients, but you can build efficiency into the model such that you can still get $1,000, but your own personal time might only be an hour, or maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Exactly.
Looked at it a different way, your effective hourly rate minus what you pay out to your own employees or the people that help you might, instead of being, if it was 4 hours, that would be $275 an hour, 3.5 hours, something like that. If your personal time, because you now have leverage, only took maybe an hour or two, now your effective hourly rate of your own personal time just became $400 or $500 an hour.
It could be more
on that same
efficient.
document, right? And so you're, in a sense, you've got a high volume of clients, but now you're actually potentially making more money for your time.
Exactly.
By just building efficiency into each unbundled service.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So this is what, it freaks me out, because it's such a massive opportunity for attorneys to be able to help a lot of people, and also increase the revenue and the income that they make for every hour in their day if they have some of these efficiencies and some of the support systems in place that can offload some of that work, and still do their due diligence to make sure that it's done right, but have some of those things that are more that someone else, like a helper, could effectively do. Right, with some limited experience, because those things are rote tasks, things that can just be done, the same time over and over again.
Right, exactly.
Have you explored or experimented with offering any form of document automation software, or using practice management tools or anything to start to streamline the actual, capturing of the intake information, maybe offloading the intake to the client to fill out a questionnaire on their own, and then having that implemented into software or anything?
Sure. So I haven't gone as far yet, Dave, as having automated systems for the client to fill out some of their intake information online. But I do use law practice management software. It's called MyCase, very similar to Clio. And I've found that is a wonderful tool, because I can set up payments. You can send invoices that way. Clients can pay their first retainer
with the click of a button.
With the click of a button. And so so to answer your question,
of a screen on a smartphone.
Exactly. And what's wonderful about that particular system is you can share documents. So you can you could upload the retainer agreement, and it's forever there in the cloud. You don't have to worry about somebody accidentally deleting an email. or, deleting a file on your computer's hard drive, or even, I use a cloud-based backup system, but I have found that, I could do better, to be honest. Every day is a learning opportunity, and I learn more and more every day. So I would, definitely like to move into more of a wholly electronic intake process in terms of once the client decides to retain me, to say, hey, here, you're just going to get an email, and you're going to be able to submit all your information via an online form, and you'll give me everything I need.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that would be one component that I don't yet have, but I have all the other pieces.
Do you see that as something that makes sense for you to start exploring, like as far as, because as an entrepreneur in mind, like this is kind of what we talked about earlier, was looking at your practice as a business first, and then as a lawyer second, perhaps.
Right.
And starting to look at how you can build systems of automation and streamlining. Because that's one of the things about the leads, is that it's very consistent types of cases that you're going to see over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Specific types of custody cases. So it lends itself well to building systems that can gradually become more and more refined and more streamlined, right? So I can just imagine that it would be something that, especially when you're offering flat rates, that like these are the things that like I get lit up about. It's like, wow, like what if we could like refine that process just a little bit more, and I can either bring the rate down when necessary for the client, or I can really see a much better effective value rate as a result, and have a great deal of success financially helping these people, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good point, because to the extent that that would actually be a dream system or software for me to be able to say, okay, new client, you're going to receive an email, and you're going to receive a login, and on top of the the billing management software and the file management software, to be able to say, hey, you're going to fill out this form, because I do this in a little bit of an old school way. I send it electronically, but I have a divorce checklist for new clients, and it helps them, if they fill out the checklist properly, it actually kind of prompts them to attach documentation that I need. And I found, even early on in my practice, before linking up with you guys, that was a very efficient way of doing things. Because otherwise, I would be calling the client constantly and saying, well, hey, you gave me your bank statements, but you forgot your credit card statements.
Right.
And, I need those. And so to have, if I were to have a software program, that I could fine tune to say, hey, these are the inputs that I need the client to give, that would be, I would be able to offer, the type of service that we've just spoken about, in terms of saying, okay, if I could have a staff to push down the price for, let's say somebody needed me to fill out a response to a petition for dissolution of marriage or divorce, that would be a wonderful service to be able to offer, because quite frankly, those forms are easy to fill out.
Yeah.
And even if mistakes are made on them, they can be amended. I help clients do that all the time. So, I could even possibly push that down to like $400. I mean, just thinking about it from an
just if you have
scale.
that client in front of you that maybe can't do the 5, you could do this, right? Like it gives you the option to be able to offer something to those that are less. It allows you to help more people, right? Because you've built scale, and the people that can afford the 1,000, you can have more margin with. And that gives you more room, to provide more service in a more flexible manner for those folks, and it balances out, right? So it can be profit, and it can also be room to make a difference. Having that contribution component.
Right, because those folks would never be helped otherwise.
And it gives you the room to be able to do that. Yeah. I mean, this is really, it's the part that I get the most excited about, because it's the promise of unbundling.
Right.
Is everyone always. It seems to me that the only way to get out of this access to justice problem and to resolve it is we can't volunteer our way out of this.
Right.
You can't have lawyers that are just going to volunteer to help the poor, right? Because they have to run a practice too. They have to feed their family. They have to run a business, right, and make money, right? And so if there's a way that lawyers can work with those folks that are lower modest means or middle income and still make a great profit doing it, then all of a sudden it becomes attractive, right?
Right.
And so it really is. This is such the exciting part about this, is that lawyers can finally, make a big difference, help a lot of people, and make a great income, like excellent income, perhaps even more than they would otherwise, just doing the full representation when you factor in the account receivable and the people that just don't pay. And and just also the liability of having like a few cases versus having a lot of cases, and
sure,
that type of thing as well.
Right, and even piggybacking off of that point, Dave, one thing, and I never would generalize clients, but sometimes clients who are more wealthy and have more money are more difficult to deal with. And and I would never just generalize everyone, but in my experience, sometimes that has been problematic. And I've found that some of the unbundled clients, because they're so appreciative to have an attorney who's willing to sit and talk to them, that they're so much easier from an attorney standpoint to manage.
Yes, because they weren't necessarily expecting that they'd be able to get that. So you are exceeding their expectations from moment one.
Right.
Not only by responding to them, obviously, because you respond so quickly in real time, like, wow, you're calling me right back, and then you're willing to work with me at any means. I mean, this is amazing, right? This is way more than anyone could have expected, and so they're humbled by that, right? And just appreciative of the fact that you're giving them access to a system that they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Exactly.
It's exciting stuff, man. It really is. I'm just so excited about the future as well. Some of the things that I can see coming online as far as software and systems that are supporting, and some of the practice management software starting to integrate, this type of document automation and building these systems out. And training this, and sharing these ideas and implementing strategies, just like yourself. Like it's a constantly evolving process, right? Where you're like gradually improving it over time and adding these new tweaks and so forth. But it's amazing to think about what's possible in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now, especially once we can all start sharing these ideas as a community. And you get to meet all the other lawyers and see what their systems are using, what's the technology they've developed, what are the templates they have. And we can work together and actually share all the resources so that we can kind of work together as a cooperative years of experience.
Exactly.
So no one has to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And if people can get around like a unified concept like that, then I don't know, man, it feels to me like access to justice issues may soon be a thing of the past.
I agree.
Just break through some of these barriers.
Just get more attorneys on board, and it's really that simple.
That's right. Well, this has been just an awesome opportunity to really unpack this. I appreciate
thank you, Dave.
How you've just really broken things down. I think it's really helpful for attorneys to really hear from someone that's been doing it yourself, what it looks like, the types of options they can offer. And I'm sure that we don't even get to cover some of the other things.
Sure.
Maybe real briefly, do you want to talk about the full representation side, where people might make the transition?
Sure.
And how you do that as a pay-as-you-go, because it's not just unbundled on the limited scope. There's a lot of clients that are retaining you for full representation as well.
Exactly.
And you're being effective at being able to manage that as well. I mean, this is kind of a misconception too, that if you're doing unbundled services, that is just unbundled, right? There's a lot of lawyers that say, well, I only want to do unbundled, I don't want to do court work. But I think every single lawyer on our network that provides, works with an unbundled attorney provides both services, unbundled and full representation and the court litigation, right? And does it as full rep. So can you talk just briefly about how the full representations worked for you and how you might structure that with the clients so that for those that want that?
Sure. And I mean, honestly, from a logistics standpoint, it really just comes down to effective time management and effective calendaring. I have really not noticed any inability to properly handle cases where I'm the attorney of record for full representation because I'm handling unbundled cases. I mean, honestly, your question is prompted, the first time I've had to even think about that, because it's really effectively not an issue with me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really not. So, and yes, I've had, like we said before, I've had quite a few instances where unbundled clients turn into, full-blown clients because I've done, I've shown them, hey, even though I'm only able to do this limited work, I'm going to do the best I can on that one piece.
Yes. And then for those people that want the full representation, there's also some things that you've been doing, I think, creatively around working with people's budget.
Right.
Whether it be payment plans or kind of automating.
Sure.
Do you want to shed a little bit light on that?
And one thing that I've been able to do, and it's, again, finding the happy mediums between being a good person, not being too greedy, but realizing this is a business.
Yes.
And so one thing that I can do with payment plans is, I've had quite a few clients who, let's say they were able to give me a several $1,000 retainer to start. And, maybe they had a custody issue that was hotly contested, and so we litigate that. And unfortunately, their retainer is pretty much drained. but their case is ongoing, but the other issues aren't hotly contested. And it's very well known in California, divorce takes forever, unfortunately, even under the best of circumstances. So for some of those clients, what I've been able to do is, I very carefully draft my retainer agreement to protect myself from a business standpoint. But I've been able to have people who will say, okay, hey, there's the calm before the storm. We're in the middle of it, and nothing's really going on in the case. You might have a status conference in San Diego. They're called family resolution conferences, but case management conferences for a regular civil case. You're only going in front of the judge to say what is or is not happening in the case. You're not going to be in court as an attorney for more than an hour and a half on that type of hearing. So in those cases where there's not a lot going on and the client's already paid, a sizable retainer, I'll allow them to make payments to continue to build up their retainer.
Yes.
And
do you do that from the outset as well? Like it's like kind of a monthly replenishment? So it's not going down to zero and then racking up a big bill.
Correct.
It's like you're establishing a budget early on.
Correct.
So that it's keeping pace with what you're doing.
And I've done that on a case-by-case basis to answer your question, to where it's like, maybe the person can afford to pay me $500 a month or $400, right? And I just, I'm very careful that I'm not putting myself over more than maybe an hour outstanding billables. But I found that if a client has things going on or their case is yet to be resolved, they'll pay you.
Yes.
99 out of 100 times they'll pay you. Where you have to be careful is running up, $1,000 invoice or a $2,000 invoice, finishing a big, matter for a client. You're never going to get paid on that money.
Yes.
So I've been able to find that, happy medium, and on a case-by-case basis, I do have to be careful and look at it and make sure, okay, hey, does this person at least have $500 in their retainer account in case an emergency court hearing is scheduled?
Yes. And do they have regular income coming in? And because it's finding that balance, right? Because obviously if you have very less time that they can pay something off, you have to be maybe like draw a little bit stronger boundary as far as like what you need to come up with and what you can do. Because you kind of have to assume, like, well, they're probably if I finish this case and I have a big outstanding receivable, my chances of collecting on that are quite low.
About zero.
But zero. Okay, let's just assume it's zero, right? So you don't want that. We don't want to be in that position. But it still gives you a lot of room that I think a lot of attorneys don't take into consideration. Is like, hey, you don't have to have all the money right now as long as they're able to make payments over time as the case progresses.
And
that's the pay-as-you-go type of thing. Where they're keeping that budget, level.
And that's a perfect way to put it, the pay-as-you-go statement, because what I oftentimes tell clients is, all I ask is that you have enough money in the pot, in your trust account, to cover my minimum anticipated work if I'm going to continue to help you out.
Yes.
And so I've been able to do that even in full-blown representation cases.
Yeah, and sometimes have you been able to be flexible on what the upfront will be when you're doing full representation? To some degree, or does it have to be at a certain point to make sure you're floating the minimum?
To a certain degree, I do have to be careful. In cases where there are no children, sometimes I can be a little more flexible on the initial retainer because I know, okay, if this person doesn't have any pressing issues that require emergency court hearings or immediate motion
filings. Which is
filings,
a lot of work up front. Right? Yeah. Because a lot of times, a lot of cases are front loaded.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So if it's not that type of issue, I can take much lower retainers. Even sometimes for full representation, like $1,500 plus the court filing fees.
Right.
And a lot of attorneys won't even offer that. But it's I do have to be careful. It's kind of on a case by case basis. You have to gauge the prospective client. How reasonable are they? But not to go into that that arena too much. But
because if people can't afford more than that, then they could go the full representation route. If they can't, then this is where these unbundled options start to fit in, where you can limit the scope of your involvement to limit the amount of time, so you can suit that budget
exactly,
and then do things as needed as they can afford.
And I've done that a lot in cases where I've switched back and forth. And I even I offer that to clients when their budget starts to run out. I say, look, we do have to have this honest conversation. If your budget's this tight, I really can't continue to be your attorney of record for court hearings. But if you have a little bit of a budget, you could hire me to give you guidance every step of the way.
Okay.
And again, it's so easy. It's just I already have the contracts. I have the limited scope representation contract, the unbundled contract. I have the full representation contract. It doesn't take me that long.
Yeah.
To switch back and forth.
it's probably a little bit more common that attorneys would go limited scope to full.
Right.
But it could go, it's obviously could go back the other way too. If we're running into a point where you're providing more service than the client can afford on a monthly basis, then you might need to start limiting, and the client might have to take on some of that, but you're not leaving them alone to drown. Like they still have that guidance, they still have help with, to know what to do, so they're not being, left alone, which is really the main challenge of the problem in the United States, that people have no help. Right. And if they had a little bit of help, they have a much better shot at representing themselves effectively.
Exactly.
If you're there to provide them the guidance they need to, follow the process properly.
So it's, and I'm still learning, from trial and error, but that is a very effective service, because why let that client go? Mm-hmm. They could still be a paying client, not as much, but they could still be a good paying client.
Yeah. And you can really start to see how, like you said, within any budget, at the $250, $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, you've got a suite of options, and then on a monthly basis, as you're working with them, is it falling low? Is it falling high? Okay, we can adjust accordingly. We can drop down, or I can limit my involvement, and then your involvement steps up, so that we're keeping at it at monthly. If you're making the payments, I can do full. Exactly. But if it goes too low, then you can adjust. So it's just, for wherever someone's at, there's services that can be provided.
Exactly.
And that's, that is what this country needs. I mean, that's what, anyone out there that is going, without the help that they need, if these types of services were available to everyone in the United States, we probably wouldn't have the issues that we're having right now.
I agree.
There wouldn't be so many parents that are going without rights to their kids, or visitation, or fair custody arrangement, just from simple lack of guidance and care.
Exactly. People wouldn't have to wait as long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and legal aid could do the work they're doing, and the judges wouldn't be overwhelmed by sorts of litigants that are shuffling through boxes of receipts and clogging up the court system. So, yeah, man, it's couldn't be more optimistic about the future, especially working with attorneys like yourself that are innovating in this way and applying this in their practice and serving a ton of people that would otherwise be going completely unrepresentative results. So, much great appreciation for all the work you're doing.
Thanks, Dave.
It's a real privilege to work with attorneys like yourself that are committed to service and contribution in this way. And I couldn't be happier about the fact that you're benefiting financially and building a really successful practice at the same time. And when those two things can be combined, there's no limit, because it's completely sustainable.
Exactly.
Right? You're doing well, you're happy, you're making good money, you're building a practice, and your clients are happy because they're getting the help that they otherwise couldn't. It just seems like a winning equation for the future.
Agreed.
Yeah. So with that, thanks again for everyone participating in this podcast and joining us in for this interview. We really appreciate the fact that you're also applying these practices into your practices. We do see a very bright future in the legal system. It's going to take some time to implement. It's not something that you can start doing straight away. There's some training, there's some systems, as Lee has shared, but these are the nuts and bolts. This is the things that you can learn and apply. And we've got lots of great podcasts just like this one, including with Lee and so many other attorneys that are outlining exactly how you can start to do this and do it very profitably and help a lot of people at the same result at the same time. So I'm just really excited that we had an opportunity to have this sit down.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks.
Really enjoyed the view.
Good.
And for all of you listening, we'll certainly see you all in the next episode. Please feel free to reach out to us. We want to hear your feedback. What did you learn from this episode? Send us an email to podcast@unbundledattorney.com. You can also find us on Facebook by just searching Unbundled Attorney. On Twitter, Unbundled ATTY, Unbundled Attorney, ATTY. Send us a message, send us a note, share any resources you have. This really is a community, and we appreciate your support and participation. So for now, we'll wrap things up, and we'll see you next time.
For more information about how our exclusive Unbundled leads can help you grow your practice, visit our website at unbundledattorney.com. You can watch each new episode of the podcast on the Unbundled Attorney YouTube channel, or if you prefer to listen, you can find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And be sure to subscribe so you get each new episode as soon as it's available. And remember to leave us your review on iTunes. We read each and every one of them and really appreciate your support of the show. Once again, thanks for listening.